If everyone can just take their seats and we'll continue. We're on agenda item 15. And I'm going to hand it over to Joanne Stacy to go over this agenda item.
All right, so the first one, looking at A, this is the unprofessional conduct. I am pleased to announce it has been approved by OIL and will go into effect on April 1st. This is the packet that came back. It was originally disapproved and we had to resubmit it with some changes. It is done, good to go, and will go into effect very soon. Next one you're looking at is the updates to the form. This one is the same as it was before. We're working on staff. I will hopefully, before I leave, have this prepared to go over to DCA, and then it goes to agency after that, and then after that it can be noticed. So as we talked about the last meeting, there's a new process of getting it approved before you even notice it. So it takes a little bit longer now. They're not quite sure what the timeline is because it's a new process. Hopefully it won't be too long. Looking at C, this is the continuing optometric education. This has also been approved by OIL slightly before the other one. It went into effect January 1. We have seen positive feedback from this already with getting subject matter experts for the upcoming exams. Prior to this, it was very difficult to find enough people. This, we've had a new surge of people being interested, and also previous SMEs that had bowed out when they weren't getting credit are now back in and participating. D, the co-location requirement. This is also the same as it has been before. We're attempting to prepare them, trying to get them out as quickly as possible. That is the same with E. The qualification for foreign grads. This one.
So members, for this one, this was where in February we had brought to the board, and if we were going to continue to move forward with this, then we wanted to at least streamline the process, put the approval form, put the application in regulation because it wasn't before. So with the prior board action to repeal, we might want to consider holding this off until that, to see what happens with that piece, and then possibly moving forward if it doesn't go through. Because if it's not repealed, then we still want to make sure the process itself is streamlined. So I think with this one, we would move as far as priority, we would move it down until we see what happens. So just that.
We're going to just leave it lower priority? Okay. So moving on to the next one, looking at G, this is the certificates posting. This one I have almost finished, so hopefully it will go to DCA and to agency before I leave. Woohoo! H, abandonment application, also working on this one currently, along with I, and that is it.
Questions, comments from board members? Public comment? Item 16. Again, Joanne?
Okay. This was referenced earlier when I talked about SB 482. This is the Cures bill. Along with this bill is the requirement that the licensing agency actually look at who has a DEA number and if they're using Cures. The best way that staff has determined to do this is to ask licensees whenever they're renewing their license to provide a DEA number if they have it. What this regulation would do would be changing around the renewal form to include a DEA number if they do have it. If they don't have it, they just put no, and we move on. Also, it will verify if we do have a DEA number in the system, if it is the correct one, or if they're no longer using it, they'll be able to mark that they're no longer using it.
And the $6 increase in fees would apply only to those who have the DEA number, or does it apply to everybody?
So the $6, the cures fee applies to all who are TPA certified or above, with the caveat of the retired licensees. If they're retired, they cannot be practicing, so they don't have to register. If they are retired volunteer, they can still practice in the same scope, so they would have to register. The biggest part here is that the board is charged with enforcing whether or not enforcing the requirement that optometrists use cures, but we don't know who that is because they have to be TPA certified or above and have a DEA number. But if we don't know who has a DEA number, we will never know if they're required to register. So this is simply changing the initial and the renewal form to include that DEA number to start capturing it.
So staff is going to recommend on this one to include it into a previous regulation packet that's already being done. It's a regulation redoing the forms. This is a very like regulations. They can include it in the same packet. Helps get it through faster. So this would be included into, I believe it is listed, the previous section. Yes, B from agenda item 15.
Jessica and Joanne, will there be a time soon where cures is mandatory? And if so, will the Breeze system intuitively ask people for specific numbers, for specific registrations that would trigger the need to have cures inputted before they can move into the renewal phase?
Well, so this is the start of that process because the requirement for them to use the system goes into effect as soon as Cures comes out and says that their system is ready to go. So once that happens, and that might have just happened, I'll have to double check on that. But once that happens, this is our way of implementing that part of it. And so once we get the approval from the board to do amend the renewal and the reg goes into play, then we will then translate that to Breeze. We can't change the process in Breeze because the applications in theory are supposed to match the applications that are in reg, the paper application. So once we get the approval from the board to move forward, then we work on implementing that into Breeze.
So it becomes a programming
Yes.
issue. Great. Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Oh,
Ms. Stacy, I just so you're suggesting that the revision to the renewal notice to capture the DEA question be rolled into the previous item 15B?
Yes.
Yeah,
Similar enough.
Okay, and then has that been noticed?
No, neither of them have been noticed.
Neither of them have been noticed. Okay, so board members, I think Ms. Stacy alluded to this a little bit before when that the regulation process has changed a bit. So going forward, if the members agree to roll this in, the appropriate motion would be to commence the rulemaking process. And part of that is you send the necessary documents to the department and to agency for their concurrence prior to noticing and commencing the process.
Question? No.
So I'd like to move exactly what was stated by Kurt since he was so specific with it.
May I repeat then, members, if I
Please,
could?
if we could
Certainly.
put it
So
on record.
If the board so agrees, the motion would be to I'm sorry, I'm thinking
rulemaking.
of where I'm looking, would be to join this package with the renewal to the 15B, and then, once that is done, commence the rulemaking process with the first step being to send the necessary documents to the Department of Consumer Affairs and our State and Consumer and Business Housing Agency for approval, and with that approval, then commencing notice of the regulations.
I so move.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Any other further discussion? Public comment? Votes?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Maria Sperber?
Aye.
I'll vote aye.
Aye.
Don Burke, Lillian
Aye.
Wong, Deborah McIntyre, Aye. Glenn Calgucci.
Aye.
Sid Brandvine.
Aye.
David Turetsky. Right. Item 17.
Okay, agenda item 17. So this is going to be looking at the TPA certification. So originally when the TPA certification was created, it split up into when optometrists graduated into 3 different time periods and then had certain requirements based on when they graduated. The new bill that goes in eliminates one of the time periods, so it makes it a before and after January 1, 1996. It also removes the classroom hours from the requirement because those hours aren't really offered anymore. What this regulation packet would do would bring the regs up to date with the statute. The statute's already done. It's the 2 time periods with removing the classroom time. So we need to change the TPA certification application to reflect the new changes. It is attached. And it also removes, if you look at some of the language in our regulation, it's redundant from statute. OAL doesn't like to have the redundancy, so all the strike-throughs that you see on the language is just removing what's already in statute. So it's not changing anything.
Do we have any questions or comments? No questions. Public comment. We need a motion. I don't want to say to just
Also move.
I know. Oh, you want me to make it up?
I
I don't want to just say to approve proposed. I mean, I want to be a little bit more.
Please delegate authority to the executive officer to initiate the rulemaking process and circulate the language for the required time period. I couldn't scroll up quick enough.
Is that sufficient? And can I get a second? You? Any other comments from the board, from the public? Anyone? Now we're in the post-lunch coma. So Rachel Michelin, Mark Muradomi.
Aye.
Ruby Garcia.
Aye. Aye.
I vote aye. Donna Burke.
Aye.
Lillian Wong.
Aye.
Deborah McIntyre. Aye. Glenn Calgucci.
Aye.
Sid Brandvine. David Turetsky.
Circulate documents to the department and agency for their.
Item 18, any topics for future agenda items?
We had an offer earlier this morning from OPES for a presentation for the occupational analysis before it was being done or after, and I'd like to place it on the agenda for future items.
In referencing the minutes from the November board meeting, I believe we decided to have a standalone board meeting specific to the issue of mobile clinics, and I don't see that on the future agenda items. So can we get that added? And I also have a question. Would it be possible to vote on future agenda items so that we can prioritize what the board wants to address, so that way it's not just throw it on there and see what sticks. But I think it might be helpful to give some feedback in terms of what's the priority of the board so that we can give direction.
Maybe we can just list them and discuss them at each meeting and say, okay, first, is that?
That's fine. I just think that vote would be easier.
We used to do
just
it
faster.
like that. We would just list them, and then the list was extensive, and so add them. But we can do that. We could just bring them all
I think it's
forward.
great to take things off the list too.
Yeah,
Delete stuff.
and we did. That was actually the nice part of it. We can do that. We'll just print them, and then you guys can say, okay, name your top whatever or prioritize these, and we'll just. That work? Any other future? I actually like Mark's request. If at some point, I realize they don't have the answer, but your comment. In fact, not just children's, but optometry in the state. I don't know when we can get that information, but when appropriate.
According to the administrative handbook, the new one, we're up for elections again. For April, okay.
I have a question. Any of these that we're working on, I know that there were committees that were created. Would any of the committees be working on any of this, or when would they?
On any of,
Discussions with the board.
I mean, we do have just a list here of some that you'd rather prioritize over others. Anyone have thoughts?
Then I just have one. I know there's something about teleconferences. I think we had talked about maybe getting into WebEx at all for that. Is that part of that agenda item that's there already? Or does it have to be on the
We actually
agenda?
tried it out for one of our, we tried it out for the Practice and Education Committee because it's a small, and it worked. So the three of us were on a conference and were able to see little glitches. You have to install the program on your computer. I had to uninstall it and reinstall it a couple times.
On that topic, it might be helpful if we came up with a set of directions that we just are standard to send out to board members, to send out those we're inviting onto the calls. I think there's confusion of what to click on, what to call into. We could make something up that has graphics that shows yeah. Okay.
Done it with links, and unfortunately they don't
Weren't
click on the
getting it.
links.
Right, so maybe a pictorial, thank you.
Are there going to be committees meeting prior to the next board meeting?
Practice and Education Committee is meeting in a few weeks.
Is there, from what I'm hearing, just talking to folks offline right now, it appears that the unlicensed activities, as I was mentioning, with smartphone refractions and opticians locations, that's becoming more and more common at an extremely rapid level. Which committee would be overseeing that?
What part of that?
Well, the fact that it's probably, maybe, could be a violation of current regulations, and how should the board be addressing? How should the board be informing consumers if they go into an optician's office, which we're regulating, and there's an unlicensed person doing a refraction there? Should there be some type of notice informing that person of the risks or benefits of such a thing until there's actual action or clarification of what they're doing?
Suppose if you're talking about creating a document to inform people, that can be ask either the Consumer Protection Committee or the Public Relations Committee. I mean, the PR committee is the one that usually comes up with flyers and documents and whatnot, and then they bring it back to the board to get an approval. Yeah, if that's, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I just want to be sure that we do have committee meetings and that can address some of these things and report back to the board at the April meeting. Otherwise, we're just going to go on. And with guidance and counsel from council, that we do this because it is a consumer protection issue, and I don't want to run afoul of any potential rulings from other states. Kurt's going to say something.
I'm sure it's going to be something profound. Yeah, as to when the committees meet and what they're tasked with, I think if the board has so delegated those tasks, I think they can convene a meeting of the respective committee as appropriate. I think that's.
Question is, we can't delegate the task to which he's referring.
Okay, but what I'm saying is the committees already exist, correct? Okay. So I think in some ways you could have a meeting to at least have that committee at least talk about it.
Well, whatever committee that does address it. I know we talked about technology a lot yesterday, and I think putting out flyers and pamphlets is great, but honestly, in this day and age of technology, people who are going to go in for online refractions, who are going to be using their smartphones at home, we have to, it has to be like some kind of link, right? So that when they search online refraction, our link should pop up and saying, hey, you know, an online refraction on your smartphone is not an eye exam. So who?
Right, so,
Okay.
Actually,
so
hold-
respectfully,
wait, stop,
everybody,
stop.
wait, before we go any
Stop.
further, this is kind of a narrow agenda item, which is what are we gonna put on the agenda?
Oh,
So the issue is not how we're gonna solve the problem, if in fact that's a problem. The issue is, what are we gonna talk about? So if the board wants to talk about those things that's enumerated here, and my additions are OPES, mobile clinics, the ACA repeal, and elections are gonna be
I
on
guess-
there.
I guess my question is just, how is it that we can get Dr. Turetsky's thing moving quickly?
Dr. Tresky, is your item different than the online refractions outreach campaign that's currently on there? So what is the difference between that? We can get the wording.
The online refraction is somebody sitting in their home essentially doing a self-administered refraction. Whereas my issue is having an unlicensed person in an optical setting that this board regulates, performing the function of performing essentially optometry without direct supervision from an optometrist or an ophthalmologist as the regulations require.
But you're,
It's a-
no, I'm going back to, didn't you want to outreach to the consumer though? Isn't that what you were looking for?
And how should so there's something that's going on, which is it legal, is it illegal? I don't know, but there should be something to alert the consumer that this is not an eye exam.
just because
know,
it's
I'm
in
just-
an official setting.
Yeah,
What I'm trying to ask really is, I'm just trying to find a way to task the committee to do it. And my question is, can we do that now or not?
First of all, I think that would fit roughly within to me, it has a flavor of the online refractions a little bit, because you're doing something with these, if you consider online broadly, I believe it is would fit under that. The second thing is, this almost, in fact it is, almost a pure enforcement question. If somebody believes that there's something going against the law, I respectfully suggest it's really not a function of a committee meeting or even a board meeting. It's a function of enforcement, investigation, prosecution, and adjudication. So if someone wants to file a complaint or someone's aware of it, I think that necessitates action by the executive officer and then the deputy general. I don't want to put the board in a position of remotely determining whether something is a violation of law. What we do is we essentially let the enforcement process take care of that. So in answer to your question, Dr. Chawla, Dr. Tresky, I respectfully think that the thing you're talking about is about the protection, how would a consumer know? I think that I'm not a big fan of bullets, the fifth bullet or the fourth bullet, or I can't count that well,
Right,
whatever bullet that is. I think that is fitting in with existing endeavors, if
So
I'm not
his
mistaken.
initial question was, can we bump this up to the top of the list? And is there a committee that addresses this particular situation? I'm just asking, can we create a meeting for that committee? Can we task them with this?
I was under the impression that committee and mechanism already existed.
So they can just,
The
Keep
committee
going.
could call,
In
right?
fact,
Can a committee just,
well,
Call a
they're
meeting?
supposed to, say that we'd like to meet about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they can
The
do
pub-
that,
The
right?
Public Relations Committee last week submitted a list of items to Jessica to schedule a meeting.
Oh, so you have a
Fair.
meeting coming. Is this
Yeah.
on there?
I'll put that on the agenda.
Is this on there?
It will be.
Will be now. Okay, so there is a meeting coming. There you go. That's all I wanted to know. Can we just do it? Fine, so it's taken care of.
One other, I don't know if this is let's make it an agenda item. The president's letter is awesome. Could we add to that short report outs from any committees that meet in between our board meetings? But
I think we
just,
were trying to do that.
yeah, and maybe the dates of the next committee meetings in that, because
Yeah.
sometimes they don't get posted until,
And we were supposed to do that. We didn't have any that met from the last one to this one, but we were.
okay, great.
Any more things for future agenda items?
Mark.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a procedural point, and perhaps it's a question. This board, right now, at this moment, could say, we want, and I'm picking out of the air, the Breeze Arbo with OE tracker item to be considered by the Public Outreach Committee. We can say that right now, and that can happen.
That's
Am
what I
I-
was asking.
Respectfully, I'm not quite sure that.
We can't, well,
You know what, he answered the question in the sense that, like, if a committee wants, if there's a topic, the committee chair, for example, can say, we'd like to convene a meeting. They just request into the EO and say, we'd like to convene a meeting. These are the topics. We need a date, kind of thing, right? So,
that's another way of doing it, okay.
I mean, because nobody says no.
I won't argue, that's another way of doing it, thank you.
All right, so, the other future agenda items. Public comment. All right, so that would be the end of the open session. We'll take a few minutes to go into closed session. We're adjourned for.
If someone wants to file a complaint or someone's aware of it, I think that necessitates action by the executive officer and then the deputy general. I don't want to put the board in a position of remotely determining whether something is a violation of law. What we do is we essentially let the enforcement process take care of that. So, in answer to Dr. Tala, Dr. Tresky, I respectfully think that the thing you're talking about is about the protection. You know, how would a consumer know? I think that I'm not a big fan of bullets, the fifth bullet or the fourth bullet, or I can't count that well.
Right,
Whatever bullet that is, I think that is fitting in with existing endeavors. If
So
I'm not mistaken.
his initial question was, can we bump this up to the top of the list? And is there a committee that addresses this particular situation? I'm just asking, can we create a meeting for that committee? Can we task them with this?
I was under the impression that that committee and mechanism already existed.
They can just,
The
Keep
committee
going.
could call,
Right.
right? Can a committee just
well,
call a
they're
meeting?
supposed to, say that we'd like to meet about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they can
pub-
do that,
The
right?
Public Relations Committee last week submitted a list of items to to Jessica to schedule a meeting.
Oh, so you have a
Yeah.
meeting coming. Is this
Yeah.
on there?
I'll put that on the agenda.
Is this on there?
It will be.
Will be now. Okay, so there is a meeting coming. There you go. That's all I wanted to know. Can we just do it? Fine, so it's taken care of.
One other, I don't know if this is let's make it an agenda item. The president's letter is awesome. Could we add to that short report outs from any committees that meet in between our board meetings? But
I think we
just-
were trying to do that.
Yeah, and maybe the dates of the next committee meetings in that, because
Yeah.
sometimes they don't get posted until,
Yeah, we were supposed to do that. We didn't have any that met from the last one to this one, but we.
okay, great.
Any more things for future agenda items?
I'd like to make a procedural point, and perhaps it's a question. This board, right now, at this moment, could say, we want, and I'm picking out of the air, the Breeze Arbo with OE tracker item to be considered by the Public Outreach Committee. We can say that right now, and that can happen.
That's what I was asking.
We can't, well,
You know what, he answered the question in the sense that, like, if a committee wants, if there's a topic, the committee chair, for example, can say,